What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the ever-evolving, never-ending Ready Said podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Okay, so we are going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart. In the past, I've done an episode about Reedy Creek in Disney, and I think the last time we talked about, we didn't really know which direction it was going because the Florida Senate left it in limbo, and we finally have an answer to that question, and we are going to break that down. But first, before we get into that, I would like to ask everyone to jump over to Facebook and give our Ready Said podcast Facebook. I always struggle with that one. Facebook page a like. Check us out on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Check out some of the shorts that we have. Check out some of the clips. If you just are more into the audio side of things, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you may find your podcast, we will most likely be there. So before we get into the Reedy Creek situation, a.k.a. the Central Florida Board of Tourism, I think is what it's, CFBOT. We'll get into that in a minute. I just wanted to kind of do a little quick hit. So in the past, and this is going to be brought back by popular demand, talk about like asteroids that would almost hit the Earth, and I've kind of gotten away from that. I was going to kind of set that little segment up before I did this episode, but I was kind of struggling to find some. A lot of the asteroid stories I could find were 3-4 weeks old, and it just really didn't seem like there was much going on in that department to kind of bring it to the podcast. But we are going to keep our eye on that and let you know every time a rock comes flying near our giant rock and almost takes us out. We'll get back to that. So in the meantime, I thought we'd talk about something else. Again, these are going to be two really quick things, and then we'll break right into our main subject here. So I used to watch Saved by the Bell. Most kids grew up in the 90s, did so, and even after the fact, I think it was on reruns forever. I mean, I remember watching it Saturday mornings when it was new, and then watching it in reruns all through junior high, high school, and beyond. But recently, so I think it was during the pandemic, actually, during 2020, there was a podcast that came out called Zach to the Future. And why this podcast was very interesting, outside of the fact that it was Mark-Paul Gosselaar, rewatching old Saved by the Bell episodes and then kind of breaking down, which is actually really cool to watch because you could tell the guy is a professionally trained actor and he knows his craft. And as they would watch these episodes and talk about them, he would, it's really weird. He would say, I don't remember filming these, which is hard for me because I fucking remember everything. But he would say, oh, I was doing this, oh, that's a bad habit there. So it was interesting in those rights. The other side of it being interesting, too, was the host or the co-host they had on it was this guy named Dashel, and he was from, I don't know what he's from. I think he's a television writer, and he used to write on Saved by the Bell, the new class. I know he wrote on the new one, but he was doing a series on Funny or Die called Zach Morris's Trash, and it is fucking hilarious, and I definitely recommend people check that out. I don't think they're doing it anymore, but it's really good. So they paired these two guys together for it, and it was a good podcast, and I'll get into why that's important here in a second. But one of the things that I couldn't help kind of stop thinking about today was the fact of what Mark-Paul Gosselaar used to look like in Season 1 versus Season 4, and you'll see how the podcast ties into that here in a second. All right, so let's look here. I'm going to mute this because it's not really important what they're talking about. But let's just look at Zach Morris right now. I mean, this is Season 1. I don't know what episode it is. Does it say right there? It does not. Okay, but this is definitely Season 1. From what you know now, from listening to the podcast, what's her face? She's definitely older than these two. I mean, look, she's obviously been through puberty. She's tall. She's leggy. These two are two prepubescent fucks. And look at Zach. He looks like he's almost he's pretty young. I think he's like 15 or 16, but he's small. He's a little dude. I mean, he's almost the size of Screech. Look when they get closer to each other. I mean, Jesse towers over them. Look at that. They're almost to the same. He's a little taller. His shoulders are a little bit broader, but they're ultimately the same size. I mean, he does definitely have a size advantage on him, but him next to Jesse, there isn't that same differential. Now, here's where it gets kind of interesting. If you fast forward to Season 5, look at this. Now, I know what you're saying, Joe, but this is 4 years later. Puberty, growth spurt, puberty. Okay. I mean, there is some truth to that. But, I mean, okay, so maybe he got a little taller, but, I mean, look at the size difference. Like, this man clearly I don't know anyone who's gone through puberty and then added 30 pounds of muscle at the same time. Now, here's where the tie-in is. If you listen to that Zach to the Future podcast, what you end up hearing is Mark-Paul ends up kind of tipping his hand without kind of realizing it. And at least maybe that's me, but kind of what I gathered from it was he was saying that in the first few seasons, he was just a kid that liked to ride his dirt bike, and then I think as the seasons were going on, he started making some friends because obviously you're on a Saturday morning TV show, you got some clout. And what I think ended up happening, he didn't say who, but he said he had some friends that he started hanging out with, and they were working out in their gym and drinking a lot of eggs. And then that's how he ends up turning into that? I don't think so, Tim.
I don't think so, Tim.
Or as Ken always says to me, there's obviously that's steroids. I mean, again, I'm not saying the guy was like juicing like fucking, what's that dude's name? Bash Brothers, Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco. Maybe not to that level, but there was clearly steroid use going on because, again, it is not normal to go from, let me get you the view, from this to that. This, that. I mean, look, bigger shoulders. I guarantee these shirts. And here's how I also know. That's a loose-fitting shirt. You know what I mean? And there's another episode later on where I couldn't find a good quality version of it, but Screech rips his shirt off because Zach starts hooking up with the girl that he's liked his whole life. I mean, again, when you're that age, everyone's genetics are different. I'm not denying that, but I'm just saying, like, you don't normally start looking like that within 5 years of just lifting weights and drinking eggs. That's all I got to say to that. All right. So the next one I want to talk about, and then I promise we'll get into Reedy Creek here, is this guy who does the Tunnel to Towers. If you watch enough Fox News, I don't know where else they would put this on, but this guy is like every other commercial break. He's on there. And honestly, the best way for Fox News to ruin my morning is to put this commercial on. And again, most of the time I have Fox News just muted, but I see the commercial. So I know what's being said. It's a great foundation, I'm sure. They do great things. I'm not denying that. It's for veterans. It's fine. I have no issue with the actual charity. What I have an issue, I don't even have an issue with. What I kind of laugh at is I just have to openly wonder, does this guy, is it Frank Silas, I think is his name? I might be even screwing that up. Like, let's say, I just wonder, like, let's say his brother lived. Would his life be better? I'm sure he's going to say, yeah, my brother's alive. Of course it's better. I mean, who wouldn't say that, right? But, sir, if your brother is alive, you don't have Tunnel to Towers, you don't nearly have all this clout, you don't go on Fox and Friends, what would you be doing? You know what I mean? And I wonder if there is a part of his brain that sits there whenever he does one of these Tunnel to Tower events or whenever he receives his paycheck from Tunnel to Towers, because I guarantee you he's the top guy there, probably making 6 digits. You gotta wonder how many pennies of your dollar you're donating is going into Frank's pocket. Would Frank be doing this good if his brother was still alive? I'm a little skeptical. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, so let's get into our main story here, and this is again something I never thought I would live to see the day, and that is the Florida State Legislature and the government, in essence, taking away the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Now, before we kind of go into all of that stuff, let's kind of talk about, or look at what the Reedy Creek Improvement District is, just in case anyone who's watching this doesn't know. So here's what we have here. Is now it's going to be called the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. CFTOD. Oh, I was close. I think I said CFBOT. It's whatever. Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. And this is essentially what Reedy Creek was. You know what I mean? It is all I think that's about 27 to 30,000 acres of land. This, for anyone who lives here locally or doesn't, is a Highway 429 that runs north to south. This is all of Disney. Right? If all these red roads here, these are these are the Disney roads that you drive on. And you can see it's a vast piece of land. And if you'll notice here, it kind of, turns white. Like, this was Disney's property. They just annexed all of this out to Celebration. So anyway, let's talk about this really quickly. It was the governing jurisdiction and special taxing district for the land of Walt Disney World Resort. It includes 39.06 square miles within the outer limits of Orange and Osceola counties in Florida. It acts most of the same authority and responsibility as a county government. That's very important. It includes the cities of Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, as well as unincorporated land. The district was created in 1967. After the Florida legislature passed the Reedy Creek Improvement Act, the law was pushed for Walt Disney and his namesake media company both before and after Disney's death in 1966, during the planning stages of Walt Disney World. So here's what is important. The district has the authority of a government body, but was not subjected to the constraints of a government body until the governor was granted authority to name board members in 2023. So this is kind of where it's starting to change. So we'll get away from that for a quick second, because you're probably starting to wonder how did we get here? Now, we did kind of talk about that before, and we're going to kind of go over that really quickly as well. So let's see. I got to find this article here. All right, so we're going to talk about what happened and kind of work our way backwards from there, and you'll see. All right, so let's go to this article here. So we have the Senate voted 26-9 to approve a bill giving DeSantis the power to appoint the 5-member Reedy Creek Improvement District and change its name to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District to more accurately reflect its function, said Travis Hudson, who shepherded the House bill through the Senate. I think that guy's out of St. Cloud. I don't think this is a hostile takeover of a private company. And so I was wrong. He's from Palm Coast. I don't think this is a hostile takeover over a private company. Addressing concerns raised by the Democratic lawmakers that this is a power grab by DeSantis. The governor can put anyone on the board he thinks is qualified. They are going to have really intelligent, really bright people on the board who make sure what they are supposed to do. So the Florida legislature made this law, obviously, to turn over the district back to the state and get rid of this rubber stamp committee that we have. All right, so what happened with Disney was they were pretty apolitical, and they essentially came out, and when the governor passed a law, everyone knows it as the Don't Say Gay bill. And here in Florida, they were just kind of trying to tamp down, teachers teaching some weird stuff to kids. And this, as much as I disagree with Tallahassee controlling local school boards, there's also the other side of the coin is when there isn't any control and you have people taking liberties that they probably shouldn't with kids that aren't theirs, sometimes the adults have to step in, so to speak. And I hate those kinds of forms of government regulations, but I also hate people who are, transing the kids, so to speak. I know that's not fair to say, but what else is it? These kind of subjects aren't for public education. That is for something that be taught at home between the kids and their parents. And I feel like there's a lot of people here in Florida, especially in government power, who feel the same way. And Disney, they kind of stepped out of their lane and made a few comments about this, Bob Chapek, and they kind of got, they got what was coming to them. All they had to do was say nothing, but the activist base in Disney wouldn't allow that, and they got to the CEO. He said something, and now Disney basically owes Florida a few $1 billion or whatever the amount is in taxes. And, I don't know. There's not really much to say. Like, it just shows you how Disney, they really thought they could say all this stuff and nothing would happen, and when you never are held accountable. I mean, think about it. Disney is not held accountable by anyone. Maybe people that can't afford to go there will stop going there. But Disney has so much demand, they don't care. You know what I mean? They're like, fine, don't go here. We'll just continually raise our ticket prices and have less people in the park and still pull in a profit. Like, that's how much demand Disney has. So they're not going to have any accountability or have to react to their customer base. They really seem to be only beholden to the people that they need to work their shitty jobs. That's why I guess, they were so, quick to respond to Florida. But the problem is with Disney is none of these people live here. They are a bunch of California executives who live in California, pay lots of taxes in California, and don't vote in Florida. So why should a bunch of California executives have any say about what happens here in Florida? And I totally agree with that. And they basically were talking way too much, and look where they are now. Now they lost their special tax district. So let's go into what happened here and how they lost their district. The Senate voted 26-9 to approve a bill giving DeSantis the power to appoint the 5-member Reedy Creek Improvement District and change its name to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. So this is kind of also what I wanted to talk about here, which is going to lead me into the next point here. And I've been hearing this one a lot when I talk to people about Reedy Creek. There's a lot of people that don't really know about Reedy Creek. They know the basics of it, but not like really how exactly it works. And there's a perfect example of this right here. So we have this Republican from the Palm Coast in the Florida House. He says, I don't think this is a hostile takeover over a private company. Addressing concerns that raised by Democratic Florida lawmakers that this is a power grab by DeSantis. The governor can put anyone on the board he thinks is qualified. They're going to be really intelligent, really brilliant people on this board to make sure they can do what they're supposed to do. Now, okay, fine. They're just meeting once a month to talk about roads and drainages and stuff like that. So, I don't know about how super qualified you have to be, but, it probably shouldn't be a super lefty either. But let's talk about this first line he said. I don't think this is a hostile takeover over a private company. Now, you're probably asking yourself, Joe, what the hell are you talking about? I constantly hear people parrot this talking point. Oh, this is a hostile takeover by Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is trying to take over Disney and the county government. Well, first of all, it's a special purpose district. So it's like a county government. It runs and operates like a county government. Most county governments have a board. They have a county board, which are basically like their legislatures. You know what I mean? And Reedy Creek is essentially its own county that runs autonomous from Orange and Osceola County. So essentially, they don't have to go to the county and be like, can we fill a pothole, please? Can we get a building permit to fix a ride? Like, they don't have to do anything like that. They can just do it, all right? So it's just very interesting to me to hear people say, like, oh, well, this is a hostile takeover. It's not a hostile takeover because Disney is still Disney. The difference is that now that Ron DeSantis has basically gotten rid of the rubber stamp committee of Reedy Creek Improvement District and replaced it with this Central Florida Board of Tourism, or I think I already screwed that up. What do they call it again? Just so I know. Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. I'm never going to get this. It's just that simple. So, yeah, what I'm focusing on here is this line. I don't think this is a hostile takeover. Okay, and it's not because, and I'm going to show you why here right now. Let's start with like what this was. So this was actually done, as you'll see here, in December of 2004. And why this report was done was because this, I think, was during the time that Disney was thinking about selling to Comcast. And that kind of put Florida in this weird spot where they're like, okay, what happens if another company comes in and buys Disney? What do we do about this special district? Like, because the worry was that someone would come in like Comcast, because I think they were maybe in talks of buying Disney, and then kick out people off the Reedy Creek board, put their own people in, and then kind of start doing their own thing. Because remember, this agreement was made between the Florida State Legislature and Disney. So if a third party came in, bought Disney, now Florida's worried that they're not going to kind of hold up their end of their bargain as far as, it was very open-ended, mainly to get away from the special district's overall mission statement, if you will, and that is to promote tourism, build this, build that, and blah, blah, blah. So what I was saying is, everyone's like, oh, this is a hostile takeover by Ron DeSantis. Well, guess what? I got some bad news for you. It's not, because there is oversight already from the federal government. Because the Reedy Creek Improvement District is looked over by the EPA because they have lakes and stuff like that. There's about 7,500 acres of forest preserve back there that Disney said that they would preserve. And, basically, the EPA is the one that watches over all of that. Now, there's also one other federal bureaucracy that oversees Reedy Creek, and that would be the U.S. DOT, the Department of Transportation. Well, why would the US DOT be involved in all of that? Because they build roads, and so does Disney. And they need to make sure that the bridges Disney has, the roads that they have, they're all up to par. Because again, Disney's a business. Can you imagine if McDonald's was in charge of the roadways and bridges that were around their restaurants? Do you think those bridges would ever be maintained? Do you think they would, pay the top dollar to make sure those bridges were maintained? For crying out loud, most of these restaurants can't keep themselves clean. So you could see why there would have to be federal oversight here for all the lakes, forest preserves, and all the bridges and the roads. Well, guess what? There's even state oversight, and here they are right here. Reedy Creek Improvement District must annually report to several state agencies. And here you have the Auditor General, the Department of Community Affairs, Department of Financial Services, Department of Management and Services, Division of Retirement, Department of Revenue, the Property Tax Administration, State Board of Administration. I mean, you can see the list goes on and on and on there. So it's not that Disney Reedy Creek was just operating without any oversight whatsoever. You know what I mean? It's not the White House. It's not Congress. You know what I mean? Like, they still have people to answer to in Florida. And, so this whole idea that DeSantis just came in there and took over the whole thing and, Disney just got booted out. I mean, it's not true. Essentially what was happening is you had Disney running a county, okay? And that county basically had a rubber stamp committee. So whatever Disney needed to be done would get done because these 5 members would obviously just serve Disney because otherwise they wouldn't have the 5 acres of land that Disney gave them to be on that board. It could all be taken away so quickly. So it was basically a rubber stamp committee that had this federal and state oversight over it. Now, again, it wasn't like a board of people over that were in oversight to Reedy Creek. It was these 5-6 different offices plus 2 different offices from the federal government. So I would say that's oversight like I would say that's the same kind of oversight an Uber driver probably has with Uber. It's very autonomous. And even from some of the research I did leading up to this podcast, it didn't seem. Actually, there wasn't anything I could find. They've been running the district very well for the last 50 years, basically 55, 6 years. So this whole notion that like the state came in there and basically took it away. I mean, not really. They just got rid of the rubber stamp committee. Because what I was saying is you had the rubber stamp committee and then all this oversight above that committee. And they basically just got rid of that rubber stamp committee and then plugging people in. Now, if I was DeSantis, I would just take one person from each of these offices or someone who was some kind of liaison and then stick them on the board that way. Now, okay, so that's kind of it. So essentially, I mean, that's kind of what's going to happen. It's not in effect now. That's another thing I'm kind of seeing a lot of people thinking like this is happening now. The bill was signed into law, which means it's going to go into effect on July 1st. So Disney can kind of still do what it needs to do up until July 1st. They're going to rubber stamp as much as they can in between now and then. Then the Florida, that 5-person board from that will be confirmed by the Senate. That's probably why they need some time too. Will come in and take over. Now, that's basically it for that, but I just wanted to look at this one thing. There was one more thing that I found that I thought was very interesting. This goes back a little bit. I mean, we're going to June 21st, 1997. I'm sorry this article is a little bit cut off, but it basically talks about a lawsuit that was being levied against Disney in the Florida's 5th District Court. So they sued Disney because they wanted. Let's just read the fucking article. I'll shut the fuck up here. These ads are rough. Walt Disney World can keep its security force records private, a state appellate court ruled Friday. Florida's 5th District Court of Appeal upheld without comment a lower court ruling denying a Windermere couple's request for access to Disney's security records. Bob and Kathy Sepkima sought the records to support their claim that Disney Security caused their son's death by assuming the duties of law enforcement and negligently chasing a truck in which he was a passenger. So I think what was going on is back then the Disney security forces used to have, I don't know if it was cherries and berries, if it was red and blue, or if it was just red, but either way, it mirrored like law enforcement. And and how it works in Reedy Creek is these security guys, actually I think it says it here, but yeah, they're allowed to pull over other Reedy Creek employees. So if you're a Reedy Creek employee and you're speeding down the road, this explains why actually all the Disney transport buses and all those guys drive like so fucking slow, because they can get pulled over by another employee legally, so to speak, the Disney security. And, the county police are back there too. Don't forget about that. But, I mean, you really got to be fucking around to get pulled over back there by a county police officer. So anyway, because the security had the cherries or the berries or just the cherries, it caused these kids to start running from them. And then I guess because of that, the gentleman died in 1994 when his truck was driven by his friend crashed into the woods, leaving Disney property. They argue that Disney's 800-member security force enforces the law like all Florida police departments, is required to open its records to the public, which makes sense, because all these police departments are, funded by the taxpayer dollars. So, if we're going to fund it, we need to know what's going on, Now, Disney isn't really funded by taxpayer dollars, but so you could see why they didn't want to go with a police force, because if they had a police force, and again, Florida has open record laws. All of this information would be available for everyone. And Disney's a corporation. They don't want people digging around in their records for obvious reasons. I mean, they went through these lengths to make sure you couldn't. Orange County Circuit Judge Belvin Perry had ruled that Disney performs only routine nightman watchman services, not law enforcement. The appeal court finalized Perry's ruling, denied the subpoenas the right to appeal to the Florida. Oh, wow. So the appeal court, wow. So they weren't even allowed to take that to the Florida Supreme Court. You got a lot of power in a state when you're a corporation, when, again, I'm sure there's legal procedures that allow that to happen. But, yeah, I mean, that just shows you Disney has a lot of power down here. I mean, they found the limits of their power recently, but, back then it didn't seem to have much. That fact angered Orlando lawyer who plans to ask the appeals court to consider. I guess they're talking about the right to appeal to the Supreme Court. And the lawyer kind of has a good point here. Again, I'm sorry about how this screen's all screwed up. I apologize. I'm going to ask them, why can't you give us at least one paragraph explaining, I'm going to go to the main one here, your affirmance so we can get the Supreme Court to review this case. I think it was an abuse of power not to issue an opinion in a case of such significant public importance. And I got to agree with the lawyer there. I mean, again, I'm not really pro-Disney, a little anti-Disney myself, but it's obvious there that Disney's shenanigans, you could see why they didn't want a police force. This is kind of eye-opening, kind of even to the last episode that we did, because I always used to wonder, why don't they have a police force? What stopped them from doing it other than the optics? Well, there you go. It's the open public record law. All of these, again, what would happen? Would you have a Florida man, or would it be a Disney man? Like how would that work? It would probably still be a Florida man, but I assume if Disney's police force existed and it had open public record laws, you would have a Disney man. A Disney man? Whichever. Yep, that's going to be it. Please check us out on Facebook. Check out the Facebook page. Give it a like. Check us out on YouTube. Give this video a like. Please follow and subscribe to our YouTube page. Click the bell so you get notified every time we post a podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. And what do I say? It's the never-evolving, never-ending Ready Said podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. All right. Have a good one, you fucks.